All right, I'm excited about today's conversation because it's going to revolve around recruiting and hiring and interviewing. And for those of you that have been listening to me for a long time, you know that I come from the staffing industry. I got into it back in the back during the Stone Age. Back in 1997 is when I got in. I got out in '09, but I still train and develop staffing companies to this day, among all sorts of other organizations. But my guest today is from Toronto, Canada, and he decided to start a staffing and recruiting company in December of 2021 of all times. And it's called Spark Recruiting, and they specialize in the IT space. His name is Mike Thomson, and his company's Mike's done a pretty cool job. I believe he and his wife founded the company, and they've got this really cool marketing spin that they put on the recruiting industry. And today we're going to talk about the whole concept of humanizing hiring, which is ironic when you think about it, because the industry is all about people, recruiting, interviewing, it's people. And yet we've got to find a way to infuse humanity back into it. And I totally get why we're going to focus on this area. But Mike, thanks for being with me today. I'm really interested in this conversation.
It's always great to connect with a fellow recruiter. As you were leaving the industry, I was coming in, so I feel like our career is kind of just the same. You never, one and the same.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's so interesting because, I started back in a time when the technology that existed in the late 90s was limited at best. Email was just becoming a norm inside of the company I was at. And the internet, it was about a year in when we started to post jobs online. Now, since then, it's exploded. And in many ways, I mean, the tools available to not only the hiring companies today, irrespective of industry, are unbelievable. And the tools available to recruiters or job seekers are unbelievable. And yet, to me, and I think this is what we're going to dive into here, is the relationships and the understanding of people has eroded to a point where I don't know that the industry at times is even adding any value. And I wonder at times, do the companies hiring even know how to attract people? It's crazy to me. But I wanted you to comment on that, and then we can go into 1,000 different directions. What are your thoughts on that?
For sure. I mean, I think, certainly my vantage point of getting into the business in 2009 was mostly contract recruiting in the tech space. And I want to set the stage in terms of why that's important and shape me where it is, because it's a very transactional recruit. It's a very blitzed focused, who can find the best candidate the quickest, get the right to represent, get them in the system. The first agency that gets there wins. And generally, back in 2009, companies had few jobs and there were a lot of people that wanted those jobs. So it was a real race to the candidate market. They would usually engage up to 5 agencies, and it was whoever was the fastest on the phones to get in front of the person would land the job. Now, fast forward to where we are now, that style of recruiting doesn't work anymore, but we're still operating that way. We still treat it like a transaction, like it's a blitz. Like if we can just get to the candidate first, of course they're going to say yes, because we have a job, they need a job, everybody needs a job. That's the value. And I feel like the mindset and the behavior hasn't changed and adapted to where the market is today. And I think that's probably what we're going to jump into now. But there's been a massive behavior change that's taken place in the labor market and a power dynamic shift where employers had all the control now. Now the candidates have all the control, and employers don't know what to do with that. They're in a vulnerable position for the first time, certainly in my career. And Dave, I'd like to know if you've ever seen a scenario where this has taken place before.
Probably during the .com timeframe. That was the only time that I remember candidates who had, in many cases, they didn't even have the skills, but they were getting money that was just absurd from companies that weren't even real. There were a lot of companies that, like we create a name and we get money from an investor, and then we throw it at a bunch of people, but we don't make anything. We're not developing anything. And they were paying people absurdly. And a lot of those people ended up getting laid off. That's the first time I saw it, and really the last time until now. And I agree with you. And the crazy part about '09, no matter what industry you're in, '09, the client or the hiring company seemed to be in control. And back then, they didn't have to respond to a candidate applying for a job or an agency that might be submitting to candidates. It's if they got around to getting back to you, well, great. But most of the time, no, oftentimes they didn't. Today, though, and I know I've heard you talk about this in other interviews. You've got candidates today, which, by the way, I think it's going to start shifting again, but they might have 5, 6, 7 offers in hand, and the tables have turned. But I don't know that it's a good thing. I mean, when you think about it, it was almost like the candidate was subservient to the client 13, 14 years ago. Today, it's the opposite. And I don't know that any healthy relationship can be based on that, where I've got to lure you in with money or absurd flexibility or whatever. And it's getting to the point where I wonder, when the marriage actually happens, if either side wants to be with each other. Thoughts?
Yeah, I agree completely with you. I think, the candidate having this power, it's still relatively early, and they're abusing their power, rightfully so, because they've had this period of time where the employer, the hiring manager, has had all this power. So they're abusing it. And they probably know they are. The problem with that is, I always like to go back to the paradox of choice, right? You have 8 offers. You're trying to pick the perfect job. You and I both know the perfect job doesn't exist. It's the right job for the right individual at the right time. That's it. But you have so much pressure now because you have so many options that there has to be the perfect job. So you take your time, you pick one, you're 3 months into the job, something bad happens, you immediately regret the other 7 offers that you didn't take because this one now is not the perfect one. These other ones are. What happens? You're never satisfied with the decision you make. There are too many options. Right. And the problem is you don't know what you're looking for. You're just getting options thrown at you, and you're not taking the time to really investigate, what is it I want to do? What do I want to learn? Who do I want to work with? And why do I want to do these things? There's the candidate market. You're just reacting. You're getting 8, 9, 10 offers, in your inbox constantly. So you're inflating your kind of worth and kind of just following the money instead of actually having that look internally. Now we're seeing that shift a little bit with the recent layoffs that are happening with a lot of the tech companies, where people are taking a beat now and saying, okay, what is it that I want to do next? Who do I want to work for as an individual and as in a company? And what is that going to challenge me? What problems do I want to solve? What skills do I want to develop? And those are the conversations that they should be having internally with themselves.
I want to dig in there. One comment I'll make is I think everybody's read it. I think it's Wayfair, if I'm not mistaken. They just laid off like 870 people. And I couldn't resist but to comment online. And usually I won't, but I'm thinking to myself, what kind of company realizes 870 people later that we got to lay off? I mean, how do you not see that coming? The other, and I wonder what other companies are going to be in a similar situation where they've just recklessly hired people or recklessly overpaid people. I wonder, specifically in the corporate recruiting space, having come from agency, which is where you are now. I come from agency. Anyone on the corporate recruiting side is going to hate me for making this comment, but I always viewed it as, if you go over there, it's because you weren't able to survive on the agency side. Now, they might say, no, we're more sophisticated. So I'll just say, you can think badly of me too. But there have been a lot of people that have gone from agency to corporate in the last year and a half, who I think are going to get a big bucket of water thrown in their face. The money they took, I don't know that the companies hiring them are going to retain them. Do you have any thoughts on that or perspective on that?
Yeah, you're seeing, in terms of the layoffs, if you look at the roles that are actually being laid off, there's some themes. Recruiting, internal recruiters are one. You're seeing a lot of engineering, tech talent, and sales and customer success. And I think what had happened, my own belief, this is just my own, is, you have this pandemic, and it's this irregular surge in demand that has never existed before. Some businesses did extremely well. You think about Wayfair, some of the e-commerce, Netflix, where people are stuck at home. They'd have no options. So what are they doing? They're watching more Netflix. They're buying more things online. There's their home improvement. Demand spikes dramatically over this period of time. What do companies do to react? Hire. This is the new norm. This is where we're going to be. We have to staff up. We can't staff up. We got to hire recruiters to help us staff up. They now bring their internal team up to match this level of demand that's not sustainable and not real. Yep. Then things go back to normal. And what happens? Now they have all these roles they don't need anymore, starting with recruiting and then engineering and then all of these sales and customer success. And you're seeing it come down to the level that it should have been at without this 2-year unexpected surge of demand. Now, during this surge, as you mentioned, what happens is companies can't find talent because there's limited. So what do? They pay more. In terms of how are they going to win this war on talent? We're going to pay more money. We're going to offer you more. We're going to do this. What does this do internally? The people that are doing this, if you're in an internal recruiting team and they all of a sudden are throwing 30, 40, 50% more at new people coming in, what are you doing sitting there? Well, now I'm going to go and get a job as well. So now you're having this turnover and this retention issue, as well as all these high paid individuals coming in. Now you're in a tough situation because you have all these high priced, kind of resources, and you're not having a success. So now you have to lay off. So it's an interesting cycle that's taken place. And I was actually advising a lot of clients to not hire if you can. Hold off, because it's not a good time. It's like the real estate market. Housing prices are high. Hold if you don't need to. Because if you sell your home and make a lot of value, you still have to buy something out there and the value is really high. So it's one of those things, like markets are markets, and supply and demand really dictates kind of the prices and kind of where we're at right now.
Yeah. So, go back to the speed piece. And, there was a time when no matter what the industry was, there's a race for talent. It's like being in a race for a spouse, though. Or, like I'm single and I need to get married now. Who's available? It reminds me of I don't watch these shows, by the way. I cringe anytime I see the commercials for The Bachelor or The Bachelorette. I'm thinking, you get this laundry, this list of people, and we're vying for, and maybe I'll pick you. I think it's awful. It's just so awful. But that's what's happened. And I don't getting a job or taking a job is like a marriage to me. You unless you're a consultant or a contractor, in and out in 3 months, in and out in 6 months, you're going there potentially or hopefully to stay for a period of time. You're not going in to leave. And the company is not hiring you for you to leave, hopefully. So, but to race into that, to me, seems really irresponsible on the candidate side and on the client side. We'll pay you more, just get in here. Because in the end, I find that oftentimes they're unhappy with each other. So client to candidate, irrespective of the industry, we pay you X amount of dollars for what we think you are. Thank you for coming to join our company, only to find out that you're not what we thought. Mm-hmm. You're not doing as much as we expected you to do, or you're not as productive as we thought you were going to be. And then all of a sudden they push them right out the door. And if they do that during a time where the market's correcting, not only have they taken more money than they're worth, they're not going to get it in their next job. And so how much do you think speed compromises the quality, the relationship? I mean, and I know I'm asking you questions and cutting off your answers, but I just believe in the long-term relationship. Don't recruit for now. Recruit proactively. You've got to know people in advance. How much do you focus on that versus I need to get this done yesterday?
I think there's a big difference between recruiting and hiring. I think if you're a leader in an organization, you should always be recruiting, which is networking and building that presence, talking about employer brand. Employer brand didn't exist in 2009 because you didn't need one, because you could just have a job and that was your employer brand. Now these things are really important. You need to be investing in the recruiting aspect of the hiring process. Hiring is the act. People use those words the same. And when I talk to clients, one of the red flags I have is when we're chatting about some of their needs. And I was like, when ideally would you like this individual to start? And you probably know this answer, Dave, yesterday. And it was like, well, now we have a problem because, there's unrealistic expectations here. We used to pride ourselves back in 2009 when I started that we had a 24-hour turnaround time. We get a requirement, we can get you a candidate in 24 hours. I don't believe in that anymore. I don't believe in time. I believe it takes time. And if you're doing that, you're not evaluating and not doing your clients a service of doing a full scrub of the market to kind of identify who would be the right fit and where they can come from. There are lots of people that can do a job. The job of a recruiter is to find multiple options that can do it from various backgrounds to see what's going to complement the team and have that collaboration with the hiring manager. Now, I think speed and what happened with the nature of this and some tactics that recruiters use to hiring managers to make a decision, move quick, do quick, go fast, has
Mhm.
caused a lot of these, not only the process to be shortened, but candidates being forced to make a decision really quickly, hiring managers making a decision. And to your point, that sometimes, most of the time, if you rush into it, there's expectations there that aren't met. And normally it's the chemistry between the leadership and who you're going to work for. And that's what I firmly believe in is, it's more important who you're working for than it is the company you're joining. And if you don't know that individual well enough, and it's just been a one conversation, and now you're going to be spending 40 hours a week with this individual, oh, that could be a recipe for disaster.
So how has technology helped or hurt this whole process?
So I think technology is fantastic. I think it's one of those analogies where they say, it's like a speeding car down the highway, and it can be a dangerous thing or it could be a safe thing. Depends who's driving, right? If it's an emergency service that's going to help someone, that's a great thing. If it's someone that's intoxicated, it's a bad thing. So like the car going fast is technology. Depending how you use it is whether it's good or bad. In the context of recruiting, it's amazing. The thing is in 2009, and I still hear it today, and I don't know if you do, Dave, but like there are some agencies that still claim that they have access to the greatest people. Their database is their value prop. Technology has unlocked their database is global. We all have access to the same people. If you're still claiming that you have access and you own people as your value, you're outdated. Technology has opened that up. It's great. Also, the other thing is we can create and distribute content to an audience like no other time. So in recruiting, that is really important. You're selling, you're marketing your clients to an audience to elicit curiosity and interest. And from there, it's up to the two to create that spark. I always say, like, I can't hire the right individual for you, but I can put you in contact with people that are interested and curious to have a conversation. And then that chemistry has to be there. You guys have to have that exchange. The recruiter's job is to broker the connection, and then that spark has to be generated by you guys.
Yeah, it reminds me a long time ago when we would have to fill out RFPs for companies in order to do business with them. They would often ask, well, how big is your database? And at one point, the company I was with prided itself on, we have over, it sounds ridiculous now, but we have over 500,000 candidates in our database, which sounds tiny when you think of LinkedIn or anything like that now. But the reality is we didn't know 500,000 people. They were in there. They were just dying skeleton resumes that nobody knew. And I think that the opposite is true today. It's, everyone has access to the same talent, to the same candidates. 90% of the candidates that you might find for a job are probably sitting in your clients and, some sort of LinkedIn connection folder as well. At the end of the day, it's who's got the relationship. And I don't know why, but I find a lot of recruiters don't have the relationship. They don't know the people they're calling, or they don't know the people they're submitting, or they only know the job part of them. There's the human is not known.
It's
And
gone.
so, yeah. And when it comes to, say, negotiating or advising or pushing back, there are a lot of recruiters that I've met over the years. They don't feel comfortable in that role. They're just hoping that they can find a great job. So this person here says yes. And on the client side, the same thing. It's like, no, I've got a client, they need help, and I just hope they hire my candidate. But they're not positioned in the middle with any legit influence. And I wanted to get your take on influence, because if you don't have a relationship, a real one, how can you influence the transaction on either side? And are we losing? Is the industry losing its ability to influence, or is it getting better? I think it's losing it. What do you think?
I think completely it's losing it. And I think if you look at how most organizations, and I'll talk about large organizations, are structured and how they engage with external agencies, they block that. There are most companies that if they engage an agency, it's done through talent acquisition or internal recruiters, and they won't let you talk to the hiring manager. They block that, they protect that, and they say, we'll deal with that. You just find us the candidates. And early on, it was like, okay, if I find the best candidate, I'll win. And that's my client as the recruiter. And as you evolve, and certainly as I have, I won't work on any job unless I know the hiring manager, because that's what you're selling. That's what you're selling to the network of individuals. And if you can't represent them and who they are and what they've done and what they're looking to build, then what are you doing?
Right.
There are technologies that can scrape the job boards and give you resumes for 10 cents a resume. Use those. Don't hire an agency where you're going to pay them a fee or 5 of them to just scour the market and blitz it for a 2-hour time frame, because that's all they do, because they know 5 people are on it, and that's what you get. If I was to design a recruitment process internally, what I would do is I would have agents, external agencies that I would work with, and I would ask them how they would get the business is, here's the job. How would you sell this job?
Yep.
Who would you sell it to? How much do you think the salary should be? And what would be the message you would use to resonate with that? Sell me on why you could sell this job.
Yep.
I don't care about who has the candidate. Sell me on that. And whoever has the most compelling pitch, you get it. And here's the hiring manager. Go work together and make it happen. That's how you're going to do it. Is you want to evaluate agencies on how would you sell this? Not, can you get me candidates tomorrow?
Right.
Because that doesn't work. Back to the speed and the influence part. Now you have a disconnect. The agency that's doing it is just hammering the phones or email blasting, getting a resume that looks good, forwarding it on. That's the nature of the relationship they have with the candidate. Yeah. And the internal recruiter is passing it on. Then they talk, and then it's like, okay, now you need to negotiate on their behalf. You don't even know them. You don't know the hiring. You don't know anything about them. How are you supposed to negotiate anything when it's so, tactical?
Absolutely. You reminded me of something. I still get calls because of my recruiting background. I still get calls from people that they don't even know I don't do that anymore. But I'm kind of somebody that gets called for advice. If somebody's unhappy at work or they want to just brainstorm, do I consider this company? I'm kind of that person they call. And oftentimes I'll hear, well, I've called a bunch of agencies, or I'm working with 2 or 3 agencies, and they're coming up with nothing, or they've submitted me to 5 or 6 companies and aren't getting feedback, even in this market. But I've always said, you got to go to the agency that can influence the client. Anybody can find a job. That's easy. It's, can you influence the hiring manager? Do you have direct access to a person who's going to make something happen? And the same goes for the client. Does the agency have influence over their candidate? And I wonder, like, where, that's kind of, that needs work. But also, over and above that, we've got to get beyond. And I've heard you talk about this, and I want to hear you talk more about it. Is the job description and the resume are like the biggest obstacles. To me, I listen to you talk, I'm like, wow, this guy, he thinks just like I do. The resume and the job description are what keep people apart. Thoughts? You go off on your tangent here.
I just find, and you've been doing this a long time, and certainly have we still are using just the job description and the resume as the only sales and marketing collateral in the hiring process. That's insane to me. If you look at any other product or service and how they market that to the consumer base, it's sophisticated immensely over the last 5, 10, 15 years. The recruiting process has not. We have a job description, we have a resume. That's how we determine the match and worthy of a conversation. Terrible. Like my mission is, I'm gonna put an end to the job description and the resume for sure. And I'll tell you what, there's still useful information in there. It's just uninspiring, generic, and faceless. Both of them, right? Like, if you look at the job description and the resume, I say they do a great job of talking about and we'll talk about the job description, what the company is, what the job is, and what you need. That's it. Okay. There is no mention of who or how. And most people make their hiring decisions based on who and how. That's emotional versus logical. We only market the logical aspects of the job. Success in this job will be these things. Why? Like, that's what I say to someone, the first thing when I do a kickoff with a client is like, I want someone to have previous banking experience. Why? And usually it's a blank stare. It's like, well, because we're a bank. So, like, what is it? Like, why? Why do you need this thing? And where can these skills come from? The resume, same thing. What you've done.
Yeah.
what you've accomplished, the goals you've done. What it doesn't say is who you are, what you value as an individual, what motivates you as an individual,
Right.
how you work, how you achieve those goals. If you're a sales individual and you reach quota or 150% of quota, how did you do that?
Yep.
That's important, not what you've done, just
Yep.
how you've done it. That's the matchmaking aspect. That's recruiting, is the how and the who.
Right.
And we don't have that anywhere in the process.
I know. You're so right. And the experience thing is just laughable. It's laughable.
Oh,
You say banking or staffing, or I've talked to people and they think that, it's such an intricate process of learning our industry, and only a select few can even understand. I'm like, yeah, because when you came into banking, you knew all about banking, right? I mean, you were raised in a bank, or you were raised in an engineering firm. I mean, your father was a piece of machinery. I mean, it's crazy, but like the people hiring forget that at one point they didn't have that. And the industry itself and the skills themselves that's the easy part, not simple,
easy.
but what's missing, I think, and I think this was what you're alluding to, is the DNA. What is it that causes this individual to thrive in this environment? Is it curiosity? Is it responsiveness? Is it they have a wild interest in this industry or this technology? There's just something about them. It makes it tick. And then also how people come together. You've talked a lot about the qualities of a manager. By the way, and I'm going to go back on this real quick. I question why, like when you think about it, who is recruiting for the organization? Now, I know as an agency, I would recruit on behalf of other companies. That's what you're doing. But if you don't know that hiring manager, how can you effectively recruit? You've got to know that person, what makes them tick, their personality type, their quirks, so that you can position that. That's what helped me when I was in staffing. That's what helped me sell to candidates more than anything else, is my ability to just read my client and know how they thought and how they decided and how they got along with other people or not.
Mm-hmm.
That was the sale. It was never the job. I placed so many people who didn't even have the skills to do the job because they knew the client. And so I don't know where I'm going with that. I hope I'm not derailing you with this random.
No, I think on that, like, a turning point for me before I started Spark was, I did very well on the agency side, because when I would reach out to candidates, I would say, let me tell you about my client, Dave. Dave runs this team. This is his background. This is what he's looking at doing. This is why he's hiring. And this is the skills that are going to be successful to get there. Oh, and by the way, Dave happens to work at TD Bank, Bank America, whatever the company is.
Yep.
Nobody recruits that way. It's always, I have a job with TD Bank. The job ID number is 4579 or whatever the stupid number is. Sign this right to represent form, send me your resume, and we'll put you in the system. The scary thing is that's 99% of the recruiting calls. That's how they go. So when you go in and say, let me tell you about the human you're going to be working with on the other side of this, what do you think happens to that candidate experience immediately? Oh, it's different. It's unique. You have my attention. Tell me about this. And then they get excited. It's an emotional response. So that's what we've done now at scale, is just amplifying that. Is like, so we've been doing that for years, where we just tell clients or candidates about the hiring manager. And now my epiphany moment was like, why should I do that? Let them speak for themselves and create a platform and let them amplify their voices to the audience and speak genuinely and authentic to who they are, because they're the biggest piece of this job. Right. So why aren't we putting that at the core of the campaign? Because it doesn't matter the title, the money, all those, as much as the boss, because we all know we've made sacrifices before for money and title and had a terrible boss, and we all know how that worked out. So
you're are you referencing Spark TV? Is that
So yeah, Spark TV is how we do that. So how we've experimented with a few things, and we still are. One of the things that's been hugely successful is a live job description. So what we do is, say you're hiring a recruiter, Dave, what we would do is we would book a time probably about a week or two out and do a live discussion. Now, during that week or two, that's our recruit. And our recruit isn't, do you want to work at this company? It's, hey, I'm hosting this event for Dave. He's hiring. If you're curious, you should come check it out. It's a 20-minute conversation. What that does is people disarms them, because nobody's looking. Most people aren't. they have a job, but they may be curious. So now we host a live discussion where you get to speak casually, like we're at a coffee shop or a bar, to me about the job. Here's who I am. Here's what we've done. Here's the role. Here's the team. And what you have now is an audience of curious candidates that are listening and learning about the job from you instead of reading about it or getting it forward in their inbox from a recruiter.
Right.
So what that does is now it creates an emotional connection before they even apply to the job.
Right.
What we get is we get a response that says, I want to work for Dave. Right. Not, this job sounds interesting, let's apply it. I want to work for Dave because of these reasons. So that is powerful. That is how you effectively market a job, is by putting the boss, the hiring manager, at the core of that and amplifying their voice to a captive audience.
Provided that you have a manager that should be a manager, right? I mean, is there any, you know what I'm saying?
But that's how you rule them out, because some people shouldn't. And you know what? Like, you're going to get caught at some point, right? Whether you trick people to get them to work for you and they end up leaving in a year, then you shouldn't be a manager. And an organization should find that out sooner rather than later, right? It's no different, it's no different in politics. You identify pretty quickly who candidates are going to be based on the reaction they get, and when you throw them into those situations, that's hiring. We've promoted people into managing positions that shouldn't be there because we had to give them more money or we had to give them a promotion. There was no other way to do it. So now you're the manager. You were the best engineer on the team. Now you're the manager because we have to give you more money. No. You were the best sales individual. Now you're managing the sales team because we have to give you more money. No. No. We talk about this in sports. The best players turn out to be terrible coach. Wayne Gretzky, one of the worst coaches, one of the greatest hockey players of all time. It doesn't work that way. It doesn't translate. The best coaches were not the best players. The coaching and managing skill set is different. And through this retention, through this effort of hiring, survival of the fittest, we're going to figure out who should be in these positions.
Right. And it's such an inexact science. And I love the, you couldn't do this unless you had the ability to bring in the hiring manager to that call. I mean, think about all the agencies that, some of them are better than others, but they don't even believe they can get the right person on the phone or on a Zoom call like that. They think, well, I'm stuck with this level of person. And then I wonder, to what extent are you doing yourself as a company a disservice by having just the wrong face recruiting, the wrong voice recruiting? Go back though. I digress. on the candidate side, what are your thoughts on bringing questions to the interview? I'll just say my 2 cents. If you're not interviewing the client or the hiring company as much as they're interviewing you, you're doing yourself a disservice. What's your take on that?
I think you mentioned it earlier, and it's and I happen to be a fan, don't judge me, of The Bachelor, Bachelorette, but that's normally how people think about the interview process, right? They're a contestant, Bachelor, they need to win. They need to say what they need to say. They need to do everything they need to win. Mm-hmm. What happens with those relationships afterwards? 9 times out of 10 or 9.5 times out of 10, they don't work. Why? Because the contestant or the candidate wasn't vetting them as much as they were being vetted. Right. And that's what the change needs to happen. I always advise every candidate before they go on an interview, we do a pre-interview, and it's like, what do you want to know from this individual? And then if they don't know where to start, it's like, what was your perfect boss you ever had? Tell me about it. Mm-hmm. And we go through that exercise, be like, why was this the greatest boss? What was the environment like? What was the culture like? What were you learning? All of these things help people, put them in that space where they did have a positive work experience. Okay, great. Let's capture that. Let's write down these qualities, and let's think about questions we can ask them to make sure that this is a similar environment that we would be going into. Because if it's not, it does not matter how much they're paying you. You're not going to like it. It's not going to work. So candidates need to take more ownership on themselves to not just say the right things to get chosen. And like, you've probably had this before, when you have multiple candidates interviewing for the same role and you're doing a pre-interview with one, they always want to know, well, what kind of questions are they going to ask me? It doesn't matter what kind of questions you can ask them. Like, it's not about being right or wrong. It's about being authentic and genuine to yourself. You don't want to win the interview. You want to do the best job at presenting who you are, because that's who you want them to choose, not the interview version of yourself, because that's not real. The interview is a simulation of the job. Sure. It's not a I'm going to ask you questions, and if you only get five right, five of six right, sorry, like that's not real life, right? Like there
Yeah.
should be no interview questions that are yes or no, because that's not the job. You have time.
Absolutely. Now, what about on the client side? How often are clients looking for the rock star? The rock star. I want to take a shower every time I hear that term. But so they expect rock star to come in, right? And then you got a rock star who thinks they're interviewing, but behind the scenes, there aren't a lot of rock stars. It's like, we want a rock star. I'm not one, and neither is the rest of my team, but you have to be one. So let's say they get one in. I mean, what happens? You ever put somebody to work, they really are good, and they make the mistake of taking that job for the money, for example, and they're working for somebody who's, I don't know, less than them in some way. They just, you're reporting to a kind of a drip, or somebody who doesn't have a backbone, or who makes a lot of money but doesn't make any decisions. I mean, there's a lot that can go wrong. How often are we vetting that stuff in the interview process?
We've created a character that we're creating a series on. She's called Sparky, and she is a rock star unicorn, because I've heard about it so much, and we had to identify an individual to do it. I think about it a little bit differently. I think everybody is a rock star unicorn for a different reason, because every individual has a unique background and a unique skill set that nobody else has.
Yeah.
Everybody has a story. So when clients say to me, it's like, I want to find a rock star, it's like, let's define what that is for you, right?
Okay.
Because it's different. There is no best candidate that works across every job. Doesn't exist. It's the right candidate at the right time for the right individual. So let's dissect what that rock star is for you. Why do you need, and first of all, it's like, why are you in such dire need of somebody to come in and have this Herculean effort to save you? Like, what kind of state is your team in, right? Like, that's a red flag for me. Like, I don't want to send somebody in there that, do you not have a team? Are they going to be doing all the jobs? Like, so it's really understanding, like, what is that perfect fit for you? Like, let's understand that, because that's my job, is to make sure that I get the perfect person for you. There is no perfect person. Stop. It's all about identifying that individual.
Would you say in your experience that the clients you work with ask the right questions?
No, they don't. And I think it's and it's not their fault. How much training do people get to recruit if you're a hiring manager?
Right.
Zero.
Right.
So what do you default to? The things we just talked about. It's got to be quick, and they have to have previous experience doing the job that I just brought them into. Yeah. And what does that lead to? What we have now is a huge diversity problem in the workforce. And why? Because if I'm hiring for a SaaS sales team, I want someone that sold SaaS before. Why? Why do you want someone that sold SaaS before? Well, SaaS is different. Well, tell me about that. What is the sales process? Let's understand the sales process, your sales process, and where can those skills come from? Because what happens is you bring people in that just have the same experience in the same industry. They have the same lens of solving that problem. So now you have a team that all attacks the problem with the same lens, because that's the experience that they brought into. Bring someone in that has the skills, but different experience, diversified lens to solve a problem. You're going to get a different response and a different makeup of the team. And that's how you're going to get diversified talent. But it's managers, they're just not given the proper training to know how to recruit.
Sure. I mean, and diversity is it is a massive topic. It's everything from race to gender to, disabilities. It covers the gamut. Industry diversity, age diversity. I mean, it's just everything. But my theory on that is, go back to the speed thing we talked about. There's this need for, I need experience yesterday. I need this yesterday. And I wonder how much of that ties back to a lack of training, a lack of employee development, where we don't have time to hire just anybody. We don't have time to ramp people up. We just need this now. And then now you're stuck. Often you're stuck with mediocrity that looks the same, that sounds the same, because they don't spend enough time on the employee development. Take thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think it's always ironic when you hear someone that talks about how much they value diversity, and then you look at their hiring and they have, need 10 years of experience in the same industry. It's like, well, those are, you're not getting diverse talent from anywhere, however you define diversity, if you're limiting yourself to just, if you, as soon as you put on, and I'll give a male female kind of, comparison to this. You have a list of 10 skills and experiences on your job description you need. Men, overconfident, will apply if they have 40% of the required skills and experience. Women need 90 in order to apply. So just by adding, more things on your skills and experience, half the workforce gone. Now you're limiting to, just men that are overconfident, and overstating what they've done. So you're eliminating that aspect. When we do these live job descriptions, we don't talk about skills and experience. And what happens is 95% of the applicants that apply say they wouldn't have applied to the job description. We give them the job description afterwards. Would you apply to this? No. It's like, this is the job you just applied to through this conversation. Because most of the time, as you know, the hiring managers aren't even writing the job description. It's HR that does it, or it's just one they've recycled, or they add a few points to it. They don't think about it and then just pump it out there. So, but words are meaningful. Words are powerful. And I think that's a big part of the challenge.
So my time today is spent primarily coaching people. That's what I do. I coach them, I train them almost entirely when it under the communication umbrella. And I would say that I don't even have the exact number, but I'd say 80+% of my clients manage other people. They're either the CEO level, VP level, or director level, and they manage other people. And I coach them in the areas of communication, sales, conflict management, breaking down silos inside a company. It's all people stuff. And I guess what I struggle with on the staffing side, and it's not just my staffing clients, it's just companies in general when it comes to staffing, is why is it, though, going back to the beginning here, why is it so hard for people to connect with other people when the avenues to connect are greater and more diverse than they've ever been? Like LinkedIn, for example, or if you take a job site, like anywhere, websites, it doesn't really matter. There's a name and like I could just pick up the phone and call somebody. It's easy to connect with people today. I don't see it happening. I see I'm going to hide behind a text. I'm going to hide behind I'm never really going to get to know the person. Why is that, Mike? Help me, because I got to tell you, today it's like shooting fish in a barrel. Getting people on the phone, but not necessarily for the average recruiter. It's not. Mentally, they don't get people on the phone. They don't get people on Zoom. I don't understand it. Am I being critical? Or am I being unfair with that statement? Is it too blanketed?
No, I think you're entirely right. And I think, if you look at the recruiting cycle, it's volume, right? And why would I spend 30 minutes on the phone with someone when in 30 minutes I can blast out 1,000 emails, right? So, and you look at when people hire, you send them one candidate, they're like, Dave, this guy's phenomenal. You have anybody else? Immediately, before even, you haven't even talked to them yet. Right. Like when you're hiring, especially if you're only hiring one position, you just need one person. That's it. We don't need 10. If they're the right person, you just need one. Yeah. So I agree with you, but it's the whole industry that's done this and created this expectation of more is better. More options is better. We need to evaluate more agencies, more candidates, more resumes, more. And how do you get more? Efficiency, no phone calls. We don't have time to spend 30 minutes on the call. Or if you do, it's, hey, I have this job. Are you interested? How much money do you want? Cool. Okay. Send your resume. Next one. Hey, yep. You have it. Like that's the nature of the relationship you're building. And I agree with you. There's an opportunity to not do that because you can't, like, you have to connect with people. And on LinkedIn and online, everybody's giving their best interview persona of themselves.
Sure.
That's what they're portraying. That's not the real version of who they are. And that takes time. You have to build trust with somebody to have them be real with you. And in that transactional, hey, I have this job. How much money you want? Are you interested? Nobody's going to be vulnerable to tell you who they are. Like you're right away. They're on edge. Like, whoa, what's like? I don't know if I'm looking. Like, how much money are they offering? Like, what's all of these things. Again, you're focusing on logical and not emotional when people make these decisions emotionally.
Well, it's just like dating. It's like leading with height, weight, job. Yeah. It's like, oh, by the way, I have my bank account and I've been working here for X money. It's like, come on. But that's unfortunately how we're hiring. The you just said something else that made me oh God, I don't want, I'm going to blank on the question because I just cut myself off. It's just, I don't understand why it has become this way. And the reality is that you have somehow circumvented this process. Like I get what has happened to the industry, but without a commitment to the relationship, without this is not how we work.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how it stops. And it makes it harder for those that do it right or do it well. Maybe right's the wrong way to phrase it, but when somebody doesn't know you, if you were to call them, you're up against everybody else that's ineffectively calling them, which is even more which is why it's even more important to have a phenomenal message and to know your client or to know your candidate, because ultimately that's the answer, isn't it? Doesn't it always come back to that relationship piece?
It always does. And I caution big organizations to doing this blitz style of recruiting and engaging 10 agencies, because what we talked about, there's a massive importance placed on employer brand.
Yeah.
And what reflects negatively on an employer brand is a really bad candidate experience. And what you just talked about, either getting an email from, about one job from 10 agencies within a span of 3 minutes, or getting transactional phone calls as the first time you're introduced to this company, is a terrible, terrible candidate experience, which reflects poorly on the employer brand, versus somebody that takes the time to say, hey, let me tell you about Dave. Here's his background. Here's where he works. Here's what we're doing. All of a sudden, just through the nature of that conversation, you've influenced the employer brand in such a positive way. And organizations don't understand the impact that have. And I'll tell you, I've been in this business a long time. There is a lot of people that will not apply for companies because of a negative application process, whether it's the transactional nature or they've submitted so many times and never hear anything back. Like, sure, I'm not going to do it anymore. Like, I don't even know why I go through this process, because I've sent my resume through this ATS 1,000 times and just keep getting these generic responses back. So like, right, it's a really important overall.
So I want to be respectful of your time. I have a couple more questions. One is time. Of
course.
No one has time. We don't have time to talk to everybody. We don't have time, but yet the amount of time spent on a broken process is phenomenal. The other thing I think you said, is it paradox of choice? Is that the phrase? That to me is really the crux of all of it. Whether you're talking to a person looking for a job or a company that's hiring people, you've been around long enough. I've been around long enough to know that when you, like, for example, I have 2 boys in college. One's there, one's about to go. And my second son, he goes to Fairfield in 2 weeks. And he's still like, I hope I made the right choice. And that Fairfield's a great college, and I think he loves it and all that. But he got into a lot of places, and he's like, did I pick the right one? You go, you either did or you didn't. We won't know until you go down there and live it. And you'll either love it, you won't love it, or it'll be somewhere in the middle. But there's no perfect choice. There are infinite amount of places you could have gone. None of the decisions are right or wrong. They just are what they are. And I know that choice it confuses things for people.
Mm-hmm.
And so the value I bring, or anybody brings, is, how do I distill the choice? How do I eliminate all of this stuff? We don't need 500 resumes. We don't need like 60,000 bullets on a job description. What we need is to identify the core competencies or core values that are going to bring these two entities together, because that's ultimately the glue that makes it stick. What are your thoughts on that? I don't want to go too far off on that, but just at the end of the day, the choice is what's killing people. The perception of choice is what's killing people.
And I think you just nailed it right there. It's the perception of choice, right? It's if you're hiring, you feel like if you interview 20 candidates, you're going to find the perfect one. In that statement, we could poke so many holes in that, but like, and as a candidate, if you have 8 offers, you're finding the perfect job. No, perfect doesn't exist on both. It's the right for right now, right? And that's it. Like, there's no, and also no decision is final. You don't know the outcome. Nobody knows what's going to happen. On paper, this works perfect and is a disaster. We hear that all the time. Or this person was not qualified and now they're running the company. You don't know what's going to happen. And our lack of control on the outcome, or thinking we can control the outcome if we do enough homework and meet enough people and look at the right things, we can find the perfect answer. You can't.
Right.
There is no perfect answer because we don't know. You don't know.
So if I were to ask you if you could give advice to a job seeker of any kind, like whether it's here's what you should do, or here's a mistake, don't make it, or always make sure you do that, what advice would you give a job seeker? And if there's any advice you could give to a hiring entity of any kind, what would you say to both sides?
The job seeker one, and I do this every day with a lot of folks, is we go through an exercise. You're looking for a job. Okay, let's talk about best job you've ever had, and walk me through what that is. What were you doing? And you ask a lot of questions. As a recruiter, you're trying to help people uncover their own superpower. Everybody is, like I said before, everybody is a rock star. They just don't know it. You have to help them uncover that. And that's part of the joy. I love what I do is we go through that exercise. Tell me about a perfect job. Tell me about your perfect boss. What were all of these things? Why was it perfect? And why did you like it so much? Now you have that. Amazing. This is the core of what you need. Now, where do you want to look? Okay. LinkedIn's a powerful tool. We can look anywhere and work for anyone. And the way that the market is, like when I advise candidates, like, you don't even need me. I'll help you create the content. It's better if you're actually reaching out on your own behalf instead of me. But I will help you find the right people and reach out to them. But that's what I say. As a job seeker, you need to take ownership and accountability of your job search. Don't talk to agencies. Talk to people that you're going to work for. That's what you need to do. It's a sales process, and nobody is better at selling you than you. If you need help uncovering what your differentiator is, I can do that. But you have to sell yourself. As a job seeker, that I think that's the mind shift is, this is my responsibility. And if I want to advance my skills and find the right job for me next, it's on me. I have to do this.
Right. And not negotiating that. Once you identify what it is that makes you tick, if you don't see it, even if the money's there, don't say yes. Right.
Yeah.
Right? So what about on the client side? What advice would you give to all these companies out there that, quite frankly, are bungling the process?
Oh, first is you have time. Everybody says you don't have time. You have time because a bad hire takes a lot of time out, right? So the cost of that, not getting it right, is that now you need to do a better job of what it is you're looking for and why. Like that's a 30-minute conversation to flush out. And it's something we do in our kickoff. Why do you need this individual? Why? Tell me why. Well, the team's overworked. Why are they overworked? What's going on? Well, the demand's coming from here and this. Okay, let's dig into what's going on here. What will help is not throwing more of the same at the problem and thinking it's going to change things. If we want the team to be better, which everybody's looking for improvement, more efficiency, more effectiveness, more results, what's going to get us from current state to future state collectively, and what skill can we bring in to complement that journey? That's hiring. It's not this person's going to solve all my problems.
Got it.
No, like that's going to set them up not for success, and it's definitely, you're going to be disappointed.
Oh, spot on. Mike, what haven't I asked you? Is there anything that you want to help me close this? Anything that we haven't talked about that you think is important? Otherwise, tell everyone how to reach you, why they should call you in the first place. You can take it from here.
The one thing I want to leave this on is I know, you go on social media right now and there's these massive layoffs and things that are happening. LinkedIn is a great place, but it gives you a sliver of what's going on in the market. And there are layoffs, and I want to be sensitive to the fact that there are a lot of people that are losing their jobs. But I'm going to spread some optimism because there are a lot of people hiring. There's still a lot of hiring going on, and it's still a candidate-driven market. So this is a cautionary tale on both sides. If you're a candidate that's been victim of a layoff, take a second and think about what you want to do next, because you're going to have options. And if you don't think so, then connect with me and I will tell you where your options are going to be. So you need to attack this with some curiosity and optimism. On the hiring side, just because you go on LinkedIn and you see everybody's laying off, don't just drop in the comments that you're hiring. They know who's hiring, because everybody's still hiring. Just because Wayfair laid somebody off and you happen to be hiring doesn't mean they're going to come and work for you, and doesn't mean that that's a value add. You still have to try. You still have to market to the labor market, and you have to put forth an effort, not just here we grow again, come check us out, amazing opportunity, fill out this 20-page application process, because we know everybody loves doing those things.
Oh yeah, of course, of course, of course. What about you? What's the best way to reach you?
I am on LinkedIn probably too much than I should be. So you can check me out on LinkedIn, Mike Thomson. Also, we have Spark TV as our YouTube channel, where we do weekly episodes of Hired, where we bring guests on to talk about things in the hiring process of the labor market. And then we also feature Spark Jobs, which are kind of live job descriptions or video job descriptions we have. So if you're interested in seeing who we're profiling, then come check us out.
Excellent. Mike Thomson, Spark Recruiting. Thank you. Great conversation.
Dave, thanks for having me. This was great.
You're welcome. Talk to you soon.
All right.